It reportedly began with a single late-night phone call from California One, so unsettling that palace aides allegedly scrambled to contain the fallout before dawn reached Windsor. According to insiders, Prince Harry had just learned that someone once trusted inside Meghan's private circle had quietly turned against them. What followed, reports suggest, triggered one of the most humiliating betrayals the Sussex camp has faced since leaving royal life behind. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Reports first surfaced through what royal commentators described as unusually tense administrative whispers moving quietly between London and Montecito. According to several media insiders, Harry had allegedly been informed that a former household insider, someone once welcomed into Meghan's most protected professional orbit, had privately reopened communication channels with figures connected to the royal establishment. At first, those claims were dismissed as little more than another wave of palace gossip, the kind that constantly circles around the House of Windsor like smoke that never fully clears. But then, according to sources familiar with the situation, something changed. Conversations that were supposedly confidential allegedly began appearing in media circles with startling precision. Details that only a tiny number of individuals could have known reportedly surfaced behind closed newsroom discussions. And suddenly, the Sussex camp found itself confronting a possibility far more dangerous than hostile tabloids or online criticism. Someone close to them may have quietly turned. Insiders whisper that Meghan was allegedly blindsided by how quickly the atmosphere shifted. One moment, reports suggest, the couple believed they still maintained a tightly controlled inner circle. The next, there were growing fears that private frustrations, strategic discussions, and sensitive conversations may have been leaking beyond the walls of their California stronghold. Royal commentators immediately began drawing parallels to the Sussex's turbulent final years inside the monarchy, when accusations of staff tensions and high turnover repeatedly followed the couple through palace corridors. But according to observers close to the unfolding fallout, this felt different. This was not Anony, a Moose Palace briefing war. This allegedly came from someone who had once stood beside them. What made the situation even more explosive, reports suggest, was the timing. Palace sources claim tension surrounding the Sussex operation had already been quietly building for months. Behind the polished public appearances and carefully managed statements, insiders allegedly noticed fractures beginning to emerge within Meghan's professional relationships. Former staff connections that had once gone cold reportedly reopened behind closed doors in London, fueling speculation that old alliances inside royal circles were slowly reactivating. Why now? Why risk reigniting a conflict that had already consumed years of headlines, documentaries, interviews, and public bitterness? According to several interpretations from royal experts, the answer may lie in growing instability behind the scenes, an instability that some insiders claim had become impossible to fully contain. Harry, meanwhile, was reportedly furious. Not publicly, of course. The silence from Montecito remained almost surgical, but according to those allegedly familiar with the couple's reaction, the prince viewed the situation as a personal betrayal. Reports suggest he had trusted this individual long after others warned him to be cautious. That detail alone reportedly intensified the emotional fallout. Because for Harry, insiders claim, loyalty has always been the defining currency of his post-royal life. After years spent accusing palace systems of betrayal, manipulation, and leaks, discovering that someone within his own trusted orbit may have done the very same thing allegedly struck at the center of everything he and Meghan had tried to build. As speculation intensified, media commentators wasted little time connecting the controversy to earlier Sussex staff disputes that had long lingered over the couple's public image. Old allegations resurfaced, former headlines returned. Stories many believed had faded quietly into the background suddenly re-entered public conversation with renewed force. Royal analysts began openly questioning whether the Sussexes were facing not just another temporary scandal, but a growing crisis of trust surrounding their entire operation. And perhaps most damaging of all, questions started spreading through royal circles about who inside the wider Sussex orbit could still trust. Be trusted? Because according to insiders now watching the situation unfold from both California and London, the real shock wasn't merely that someone betrayed Meghan, it was who the palace allegedly suspected from the very beginning. For years, this former aide was believed to be fiercely loyal to Meghan Markle, present during private strategy sessions, international tours, and some of the Sussex's most turbulent royal moments. But insiders now whisper that behind the carefully polished image stood a growing resentment that eventually exploded into quiet rebellion. According to reports circulating through royal media circles, this was not simply an assistant handling schedules or coordinating appearances. Sources claim the former insider allegedly occupied a far more sensitive position within the Sussex operation, one that granted unusual access to deeply personal conversations and high-level professional discussions. During the chaotic years surrounding Harry and Meghan's royal exit, insiders suggest this aide reportedly became part of the couple's tightly guarded inner machinery, witnessing moments the public was never meant to see. From tense strategy conversations following explosive interviews to private frustrations surrounding palace negotiations, the individual allegedly stood close enough to understand not only how the Sussexes operated publicly but how they truly functioned behind closed doors. At the time, many believed that loyalty was unshakable. Royal commentators often described the Sussex camp as fiercely protective of those they trusted, particularly after years of public conflict with royal institutions and the British press. But according to several insiders now revisiting that period, cracks may have begun forming far earlier than anyone realized. Reports suggest disagreements intensified dramatically during the Sussex transition years, especially as pressures surrounding security arrangements, media scrutiny, and commercial ventures continued mounting on both sides of the Atlantic. What appeared outwardly as a confident reinvention of royal life allegedly concealed growing frustration beneath the surface. Sources familiar with former Sussex staffing structures claim tensions over Meghan's leadership style quietly circulated among certain employees long before any public speculation emerged. Those whispers, once dismissed as exaggerate, tabloid noise, are now being re-examined under an entirely different light. Royal analysts point toward the unusually high turnover that repeatedly followed the Sussex household during their final royal years, with several commentators arguing that the pattern itself fueled persistent concern within palace corridors. However, insiders stress that Harry allegedly remained deeply protective of Meghan throughout every stage of the controversy. According to reports, he firmly believed this particular aide remained among the few individuals they could still trust completely after stepping away from official royal duties. That belief, sources suggest, may have been exactly what made the alleged betrayal so devastating. As media speculation intensified, fresh claims began surfacing that communication channels between the former insider and palace-connected figures may have quietly reopened sometime after the Sussexes settled into California life. Exactly when those conversations allegedly resumed remains unclear. Some interpretations suggest they began innocently through lingering professional relationships in London. Others whisper that concerns surrounding the Sussex operation itself have encouraged deeper exchanges behind the scenes. But regardless of how it began, royal commentators increasingly believe sensitive information may have slowly traveled far beyond Montecito's carefully controlled walls. And then came the leaks. Not dramatic public confessions, not explosive televised accusations. Instead, reports describe something far more unsettling: private details quietly surfacing in fragments across media circles with almost surgical precision. Journalists allegedly began hearing remarkably specific accounts of tensions, emotional disagreements, and internal frustrations tied to the Sussex household. According to insiders, certain narratives appearing in royal commentary felt too informed to be random speculation, too accurate, too targeted. Questions rapidly spread over whether someone with first-hand knowledge had begun speaking indirectly through carefully planted conversations. For Harry, royal experts claim, the emotional fallout was immediate. After years spent accusing the palace of orchestrating leaks and betrayals against Meghan, the possibility that someone within their own trusted orbit may have contributed to damaging narratives reportedly strew a humiliating psychological blow. It threatened not only the Sussex's public image, but the very foundation of loyalty Harry believed he had rebuilt outside the monarchy. And according to royal insiders, what allegedly surfaced next left Harry feeling personally humiliated. Those familiar with the situation claim Prince Harry did not react with sadness, but with fury. Behind Montecito's polished image, reports suggest an explosive confrontation unfolded after Harry allegedly discovered how deeply the betrayal may have gone. According to insiders familiar with the growing crisis surrounding the Sussex camp, Harry allegedly viewed the situation not as a simple professional fallout, but as something intensely personal. That detail, royal commentators say, is what transformed the controversy from a damaging media headache into a full emotional rupture behind closed doors. For years, Harry has publicly framed loyalty as the central principle guiding nearly every decision he and Meghan made after leaving royal life. He defended friends fiercely, cut off critics decisively, and repeatedly accused palace systems of leaking against his family. But now, according to several interpretations, emerging from royal circles, the prince reportedly found himself confronting a deeply uncomfortable possibility that the kind of betrayal he believed existed inside the monarchy may have followed him far beyond palace walls. Reports suggest the atmosphere inside the Sussex operation quickly became tense and deeply unsettled. Sources claim fears began spreading that confidential strategies connected to media projects, public appearances, and private communications may have been exposed over a significant period of time. That possibility reportedly triggered alarm not only because of reputational damage, but because it raised far more dangerous questions. How much had this former insider truly known? And more importantly, how long had information allegedly been traveling beyond the Sussex inner circle without Harry or Meghan realizing it? According to several royal experts, those questions allegedly reopened emotional wounds dating back to the couple's chaotic departure from royal duties. The distrust, the paranoia, the constant suspicion surrounding palace briefings and damaging headlines. Insiders claim Harry had spent years believing he and Meghan were escaping an institution, that weaponized leaks and internal politics against them. Yet now, reports suggest he found himself trapped in a painfully familiar situation once again, only this time the threat allegedly emerged from someone he personally trusted. Meghan, meanwhile, reportedly felt increasingly cornered as media attention intensified around the unfolding speculation. Royal commentators claim the Duchess became deeply frustrated by the speed with which narratives surrounding the alleged betrayal spread across online platforms, television panels, and tabloid commentary. Every hour seemed to produce fresh rumors. Every silence appeared to invite even more scrutiny. And according to insiders, the Sussexes' refusal to publicly address the situation only amplified speculation that something serious may indeed have happened behind closed doors. That silence became its own form of headline. Sources now claim legal advisors may have quietly entered discussions as concerns surrounding leaked information continued escalating. While no formal action was publicly confirmed, royal analysts suggest the mere involvement of legal consultations indicated how seriously the Sussex camp allegedly viewed the situation. Reports whisper that Harry began questioning not just the former aide's actions, but the entire timeline surrounding the alleged betrayal itself. Had private frustrations been quietly shared for months? Were conversations reaching journalists intentionally? Or had the situation spiraled gradually through informal palace-connected networks beyond anyone's control? The uncertainty reportedly consumed everything. According to commentators watching the fallout unfold, Harry allegedly struggled most with the emotional humiliation attached to the situation. Because beyond headlines and media narratives stood a harsher reality. Someone once welcomed into his trusted world may have contributed to the exact atmosphere of exposure and vulnerability he spent years condemning within the monarchy. And for a prince who had repeatedly framed his departure from royal life as a fight to protect his wife from betrayal, insiders claim that realization landed with devastating force. Yet perhaps the most revealing part of the controversy was not what the Sussexes said, but what they didn't. Public silence from Montecito only fueled growing speculation across royal circles, with many observers interpreting the lack of response as evidence that the situation may have cut far deeper than ordinary palace gossip. And while Harry reportedly focused on damage control, palace figures were said to be watching the situation very differently. Inside royal circles, the reaction was reportedly not panic but icy restraint. According to multiple interpretations from palace insiders, senior figures viewed the unfolding Sussex turmoil less as a scandal and more as the inevitable collapse of fragile loyalties built outside the institution. While headlines intensified across television panels and online platforms, reports suggest the atmosphere inside palace corridors remained almost unnervingly calm. No emergency briefings, no public denials, no visible effort to intervene. According to insiders familiar with royal operations, aides allegedly avoided involvement entirely, choosing instead to observe the controversy from a careful distance as speculation surrounding Harry and Meghan continued spiraling outward. To outside observers, the silence seemed strange. After all, every controversy connected to the Sussexes has historically dragged the monarchy itself into public debate. But this time, MIA figures reportedly responded with something far colder than outrage: detachment. Royal commentators have since described the response as a calculated silent observation strategy, one rooted in the monarchy's long-standing belief that public turbulence eventually burns itself out if the institution refuses to emotionally engage with it. According to several interpretations from palace insiders, senior royals allegedly viewed the situation through an entirely different lens than the Sussex camp did, where Harry reportedly saw betrayal, humiliation, and personal collapse. Palace figures were said to see confirmation of something they had quietly feared for years: that structures built outside the monarchy lacked the institutional discipline that once protected senior royals from internal fracture. That distinction reportedly mattered enormously behind closed doors. Sources whisper that trust issues surrounding Harry and Meghan were not viewed inside royal circles as recent developments, but as part of a much longer pattern stretching back to their final years within the institution itself. Comparisons immediately resurfaced to earlier conflicts involving Sussex staff during their time at Kensington Palace and later Buckingham Palace. Royal analysts revisited old reports of strained working relationships, abrupt staff exits, and concerns surrounding household management. While none of those past allegations were ever fully resolved publicly, commentators now claim the newest controversy reignited old anxieties that had never truly disappeared behind palace walls. Yet despite the growing headlines, reports suggest senior royals remained determined to maintain distance from the unfolding fallout. Prince William and Princess Catherine, according to insiders, allegedly refused to be distracted by the controversy at all. Instead, palace sources claim the couple remained firmly focused on official duties, charitable commitments, and the increasingly heavy burden of preparing for the monarchy's future during a period already shadowed by enormous institutional pressure. That detail, commentators argue, may have carried a deeper symbolic message than any public statement ever could. While Montecito reportedly struggled with accusations of betrayal and internal distrust, the core machinery of the monarchy continued moving forward with disciplined silence. And perhaps that contrast is precisely what made the situation so psychologically devastating for Harry. Because according to royal experts, the palace's refusal to engage may not have been accidental. Some interpretations suggest senior figures deliberately avoided public commentary in order to reinforce a quiet but powerful institutional reality. The monarchy survives by absorbing turbulence, not reacting emotionally to it. In other words, while the Sussexes allegedly found themselves consumed by crisis management and fears of exposure, the institution they once left behind appeared untouched, unmoved, almost impervious to the chaos unfolding around it. That silence reportedly unsettled many observers more than an outright rebuttal ever could. Media outlets continued pressing for responses. Commentators speculated endlessly about possible palace reactions. Yet, according to insiders, no serious effort was made behind the scenes to publicly defend, attack, or rescue the Sussexes from the escalating controversy. The absence of intervention itself became the story. And within royal circles, whispers reportedly began spreading that the palace no longer viewed Sussex-related turmoil as something required, a wiring containment. Instead, some insiders claim it was increasingly regarded as evidence of the exact instability senior royals once feared would emerge outside the institutional framework of monarchy itself. Yet the silence itself may have carried a devastating message Harry never expected to hear. Then came the leak that reportedly transformed private tensions into a public disaster. Within hours, commentators across both Britain and America began dissecting claims that a former insider had quietly shattered the Sussexes' carefully controlled inner circle. What had previously existed as whispers buried deep within royal commentary suddenly exploded into mainstream conversation with astonishing speed. According to insiders, fragments of alleged internal frustration surrounding the Sussex operation began surfacing through media channels almost simultaneously, creating the impression that confidential conversations had somehow escaped the private world Harry and Meghan fought so aggressively to protect. Royal analysts described the development as deeply damaging not because a single explosive accusation emerged, but because of the slow, relentless drip of information that made the ISIS situation feel increasingly believable with every passing hour. Reports suggest private grievances tied to former staff tensions may have quietly reached journalists through indirect discussions, off-record conversations, and long-standing media relationships stretching across both London and California. Some commentators claimed the details appearing in public discourse were simply too precise to have been invented entirely from speculation. Others argued the situation reflected years of unresolved tension finally resurfacing all at once. Whatever the truth may have been behind the scenes, the public reaction was immediate and ferocious. Across social media, royal fan communities descended into open warfare. Supporters of Harry and Meghan accused palace-connected networks of orchestrating another coordinated attack against the couple, similar to the media battles that dominated their final royal years. Meanwhile, critics pointed to the controversy as evidence that instability had allegedly followed the Sussexes long after their departure from official royal duties. Old headlines resurfaced. Former interviews were dissected again. Past staff exits, once treated as isolated incidents, were suddenly woven together into a much larger narrative suggesting deeper dysfunction behind the polished California image. The online frenzy intensified by the hour. Royal commentators revisited long-running rumors surrounding Sussex staff turnover, with several analysts arguing that this latest controversy appeared to validate concerns quietly circulating for years inside palace circles. Some experts claimed the Sussex brand itself now looked increasingly vulnerable, particularly because so much of Harry and Meghan's public identity had been built around themes of trust, loyalty, emotional safety, and personal truth. According to several interpretations from media observers, the alleged betrayal struck directly at the foundation of that carefully crafted image. If even trusted insiders were now reportedly turning against them, critics began asking a far more dangerous question. Was the Sussex narrative itself beginning to fracture from within? Reports suggest Meghan grew especially angered by media portrayals describing chaos and instability surrounding her inner circle. Sources familiar with celebrity branding strategies claim narratives involving internal conflict can be extraordinarily difficult to contain once public perception begins shifting. And according to insiders, Meghan allegedly feared the controversy was no longer simply about one former aide or one isolated leak. Instead, it threatened to reshape broader perceptions of her leadership, her professional relationships, and the overall stability of the Sussex operation moving forward. Harry, meanwhile, reportedly became increasingly concerned about the long-term reputational fallout tied to future projects already under enormous public scrutiny. Royal experts claim the prince understood better than anyone how rapidly damaging narratives can consume public attention once momentum builds online. With documentaries, business partnerships, and media ventures continuing to define much of the couple's post-royal identity, insiders suggest fears emerged that ongoing speculation surrounding betrayal and internal distrust could overshadow everything else they were trying to build. Yet despite the chaos dominating headlines, public sympathy remained sharply divided. Some observers viewed Harry and Meghan as victims of another deeply invasive media cycle designed to undermine them. Others argued that, the controversy reflected deeper patterns that could no longer be dismissed entirely as tabloid fabrication. And as the debate intensified across television studios, newspaper columns, podcasts, and online forums, one uncomfortable reality reportedly became impossible for the Sussexes to ignore. The crisis was no longer contained privately behind Montecito gates. But according to insiders, the greatest damage may not have been public at all, it was personal. Reports now suggest the alleged betrayal triggered something even more dangerous around Meghan Markle: doubt. Behind the California gates and carefully managed appearances, insiders whisper that trust inside the Sussex camp reportedly began eroding at an alarming pace. What initially appeared to be a contained controversy involving one former insider allegedly evolved into something far more psychologically destabilizing. According to sources close to royal media circles, the situation reportedly created an atmosphere of growing suspicion surrounding nearly every layer of Meghan's professional and personal environment. Questions that once seemed unthinkable allegedly started surfacing quietly behind closed doors. Who had access to my sensitive discussions? Who had spoken to journalists? and perhaps most damaging of all who might speak next. Royal commentators claim the emotional impact of those fears extended far beyond public embarrassment. For years, Harry and Meghan carefully presented themselves as a united force operating outside the rigid structures of monarchy, building a new world rooted in trust, loyalty, and independence. But according to insiders, the alleged betrayal exposed how fragile that foundation may have become under relentless public scrutiny. Reports suggest concerns over loyalty inside Meghan's wider professional circle intensified rapidly as media speculation continued spreading across both Britain and America. Former allies were allegedly viewed with increasing caution. Long-standing relationships reportedly became strained. Even routine communication inside the Sussex operation was said to feel more guarded than before. Sources familiar with the situation claim Harry became especially determined to tighten control over internal communications. While exact details remain unclear, royal analysts speculate that conversations surrounding privacy, confidentiality, and access reportedly became far more restrictive in the aftermath of the controversy. That reaction, experts argue, reflected not only fear of future leaks, but a much deeper emotional reality beginning to emerge behind the scenes. The couple allegedly no longer felt certain about where vulnerability ended and exposure began. And as that uncertainty spread, old wounds reportedly reopened with brutal force. According to royal insiders, the situation allegedly revived emotional tensions Harry believed he had left behind when stepping away from royal life. Memories of palace distrust, damaging briefings, and media warfare reportedly resurfaced during private discussions, creating what some commentators described as a deeply unsettling sense of history repeating itself. The irony was impossible to ignore. After years spent accusing royal systems of cultivating fear and internal leaks, the Sussexes now allegedly found themselves trapped in an environment shaped by many of those same anxieties, only without the institutional protections the monarchy once provided. Media narratives surrounding the couple's growing isolation intensified almost immediately. Commentators across royal coverage platforms increasingly speculated that Harry and Meghan had become disconnected not only from the palace, but from many of the stable networks that once surrounded senior royals. Unlike working members of the monarchy, whose operations rely on long-standing institutional structures built over decades, the Sussex camp allegedly depended heavily on personal loyalty and carefully maintained relationships. And according to several royal experts, that model becomes dangerously vulnerable once trust begins collapsing internally. Some analysts even suggested the controversy reinforced a broader narrative already forming around the couple that their post-royal world had become increasingly isolated, defensive, and emotionally exhausting. Reports claim the constant pressure of public scrutiny, combined with fears of betrayal from within, may have created a growing sense of siege around Montecito itself. Every headline reportedly felt personal. Every rumor seemed threatening. Every former connection suddenly carried the potential for exposure. Yet perhaps the most psychologically devastating part of the situation was the uncertainty itself. Because according to insiders, Harry and Meghan allegedly never gained clarity regarding how much information had truly spread, who may have shared it, or whether additional voices connected to their past might eventually come forward. That lingering ambiguity reportedly deepened fears already consuming the Sussex inner circle. Royal commentators began openly questioning whether the controversy would remain limited to one alleged betrayal or whether it marked the beginning of something much larger. And as suspicion reportedly spread behind the scenes, royal experts say one reality became impossible to ignore. For Prince Harry, insiders claim the betrayal reportedly carried a devastating personal lesson. Leaving the royal institution may have offered freedom, but it also stripped away the protective structure that once controlled chaos behind palace walls. According to royal commentators, that realization may have landed harder than any headline, criticism, or public controversy the Duke of Sussex has faced since stepping away from royal life. Because beneath the media noise and growing speculation surrounding the alleged betrayal stood a far more painful emotional truth beginning to emerge around Harry himself. Reports suggest the prince found himself confronting the uncomfortable difference between escaping an institution and replacing the security it once provided. For years, Harry publicly described the monarchy as restrictive, emotionally suffocating, and deeply flawed. But insiders now whisper that the latest crisis allegedly exposed another side of royal life he may not have fully appreciated until it was gone. The rigid systems designed to contain disorder before it spiraled into personal collapse. Inside palace structures, senior royals operate within layers of advisors, private secretaries, communications teams, legal departments, and institutional protocols refined over generations. Every relationship is filtered carefully. Every message is controlled. Every potential vulnerability is managed before it becomes a public disaster. But according to several analysts, the Sussex's post-royal world allegedly relied on something far more fragile: personal loyalty. And unlike monarchy, loyalty networks built around celebrity culture and private alliances can fracture quickly once pressure intensifies. Royal experts increasingly drew comparisons between palace systems and Hollywood-style professional environments, arguing that the two worlds function according to entirely different rules. Inside the monarchy, loyalty is institutional. Outside it, loyalty often becomes transactional, emotional, and unpredictable. According to insiders, Harry allegedly struggled privately with that reality as fears surrounding leaks and betrayal continued spreading across his inner circle. Reports claim the prince became deeply uncertain about whom he could still fully trust, particularly after discovering how vulnerable even supposedly private relationships had become under public scrutiny. That emotional uncertainty reportedly created a heavy atmosphere around the Sussex operation itself. While Meghan allegedly remained determined to project strength publicly, royal commentators claim maintaining that image became increasingly difficult as speculation surrounding instability continued growing online. Sources suggest the Duchess understood the danger of appearing weakened during a moment already dominated by narratives of internal distrust. Public appearances reportedly remained carefully composed. Messaging stayed controlled. Yet behind the scenes, insiders whisper the emotional strain surrounding the contract. Oversee may have become impossible to fully ignore. Analysts argue the scandal reinforced broader perceptions already forming around Harry and Meghan's post-royal identity that despite financial success, global recognition, and media influence, the couple increasingly appeared isolated from both the royal institution left behind and the stable networks traditionally surrounding senior public figures. According to royal commentators, the alleged betrayal amplified concerns that the Sussex operation had become overly dependent on a small circle of intensely personal relationships, vulnerable to emotional fracture. And perhaps most damaging of all, the controversy reportedly raised difficult questions about the couple's future media strategy moving forward. For years, Harry and Meghan carefully shaped their public narrative around openness, truth-telling, and emotional transparency. But insiders now speculate the latest fallout may force a far more cautious approach in the future. Royal experts claim fears surrounding privacy, leaks, and loyalty could dramatically reshape how the Sussexes handle interviews, partnerships, staffing decisions, and personal storytelling from this point onward. Because once trust begins collapsing internally, every conversation reportedly starts feeling dangerous. Yet according to those closest to royal media circles, the greatest impact may not be visible publicly for months or even years. Insiders whisper the emotional consequences surrounding the alleged betrayal could linger far beyond headlines, leaving lasting scars on relationships, decision-making, and the couple's ability to trust new allies entering their world. For Harry especially, commentators suggest the controversy may have reopened old emotional battles he believed were finally behind him. But according to those watching closely, the final chapter of this royal fallout may still be unfolding. What allegedly began as a private act of disloyalty has now evolved into something far larger, a crisis of trust surrounding one of the world's most scrutinized couples. And according to royal insiders, Harry and Meghan may now face their most difficult challenge yet: determining who remains truly loyal as pressure continues mounting from every direction. In many ways, royal commentators argue this controversy was never truly about one former aide, one alleged leak, or even on a humiliating media cycle. Instead, insiders whisper that the scandal exposed something far deeper and potentially far more lasting: a growing fragility surrounding the Sussex world itself. For years, Harry and Meghan carefully built an image rooted in resilience, independence, and emotional honesty. They positioned themselves as survivors of institutional cruelty, determined to create a safer and more authentic life beyond palace walls. But according to analysts now watching events unfold from both Britain and California, the alleged betrayal reportedly shattered part of that carefully protected foundation by introducing a question neither public statements nor media strategies can easily answer. Who inside their world can still truly be trusted? Royal experts increasingly predict the emotional fallout surrounding the controversy could create long-term trust issues within Sussex operations moving forward. Sources claim future staffing decisions may become far more cautious, with tighter internal structures allegedly being considered in response to fears surrounding loyalty and confidentiality. Analysts suggest every future partnership, collaboration, and media venture may now face heightened internal scrutiny behind closed doors. Because according to several royal commentators, once suspicion enters a tightly controlled public operation, it rarely disappears quickly. It lingers quietly in conversations, decisions, and relationships long after headlines fade. And the headlines, insiders believe, are far from finished. Reports already suggest media attention surrounding the Sussexes may intensify dramatically in the coming weeks as speculation continues spreading across royal commentary platforms. Commentators remain divided over whether the controversy represents a temporary public relations storm or the beginning of a much larger unraveling tied to deeper instability around the couple's post-royal empire. Yet despite the growing scrutiny, Meghan is reportedly determined to regain control of the narrative before speculation hardens permanently into public perception. According to insiders, the Duchess allegedly understands the enormous stakes involved. Reputation, influence, partnerships, and future opportunities now exist under a level of examination that feels more relentless than ever before. Harry, meanwhile, is said to be carrying a very different emotion, final burden. According to royal observers, the prince reportedly remains deeply affected by the personal nature of the alleged betrayal itself. Beyond public embarrassment or media pressure lies the devastating realization that someone once trusted within his private world may have contributed to the atmosphere of suspicion now consuming it. For a man who spent years publicly fighting against what he described as institutional betrayal, the emotional irony is almost impossible to ignore. Insiders claim Harry believed leaving royal life would finally allow him to build relationships free from palace politics, hidden agendas, and calculated leaks. Yet now, according to commentators close to the unfolding fallout, he allegedly finds himself confronting many of those same fears once again, only this time without the institutional framework that once shielded him from total collapse. Palace observers have also noted the widening emotional and symbolic separation between the Sussexes and the royal institution itself. While the monarchy continues operating through centuries-old systems built to survive scandal, conflict, and internal fractures, Harry and Meghan increasingly appear isolated, shaped within a world shaped almost entirely by personal loyalty and public perception. That contrast, experts argue, may become one of the defining legacies of this entire controversy. Because in royal life, trust is never merely personal. It becomes political, strategic, sometimes even existential. And as the dust continues settling around one of the most emotionally charged Sussex controversies in recent memory, insiders whisper that the greatest consequences may still remain hidden beneath the surface, waiting quietly for the next fracture to appear. Because in the world of royalty, insiders whisper that the most dangerous enemies are rarely outside the palace gates, they are often the ones once invited inside. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.